Welcome to MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 39. A special post-hangover edition. I hope everyone had wonderful holidays, starting from the first half of Tishrei, Smeli Tachas L'Reishi, Yom Neroyim, Awe, going through the second half of Tishrei with the full moon, Zman Simchasenu, Yemini Techapkeni, Chesed, the exuberant dance all the way through Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. As the Rebbe so often cites from the Midrashim, from Halacha, Tishrei is a month of Meruba B'Meidis, filled with holidays. Chedesh HaShvi, Shvi also comes from the word Muzba, V'Savata, sated, satiated, filled and rich with holidays and all the energies that the holidays provide. In the Mamorim of Chassidus, it talks about Tishrei Eishis Reishis, like Rosh Hashanah Reish, not just Tchilas Hashanah, it's not just the beginning of the year, but it's the head of the year. And the head is also the central nervous system. It controls all the days of the year, like the head controls all the organs and limbs and parts of the body. Thus, the holidays of Tishrei are not just regular holidays, they're Reishis, they're head, central nervous system type of holidays. As Chassidus explains that Kabbalah Sel Malchus Shamayim throughout the year comes from the power of Rosh Hashanah, Tamlichuni Aleichem. Sanctity, Kedusha, and Tshuva throughout the year comes from Yom Kippur. And Simcha throughout the year, joy throughout the year, comes from Sukkot. So these are richer holidays, and now comes the time, as the Rebbe Friedrich Rebbe brings in the Sichos, to Fanander Packen the Peklach, to unpack the luggage, to unpack all that we gathered in this journey in Tishrei. In this right spirit of Chassidus Applied, we want to demonstrate how every time of the year, every period of the year, actually provides us with psychological, emotional, and personal tools to deal with the struggles of our daily lives, to deal with the challenges, to deal with the goods, the highs, the lows, the more good things and the things that are less revealed good. So everything in life, the tools of Torah, Melashon Hera, as a directive, is there to help us through that journey. So this period in time as well, not just the holidays, but now post-holidays, as we are literally coming from Shabbos Bereshis, that concluded a whole series of the Yom Tov that I just described, has tremendous, tremendous lessons, personal lessons for our well-being and for our lives and for our children's lives and families and so on, to enhance both our lives and our relationships. So let's begin with the most obvious question: how do I avoid the inevitable hangover after the holidays? It's one thing to be inspired during the holidays, but another to be inspired once we enter the mundane, regular life. In other words, inspiration is relatively easy. Maintaining it, perpetuating it, is far more difficult. That's why maintenance contracts are far more expensive than the initial visit. Because maintaining things, maintaining a diet, maintaining a resolution, maintaining something, takes far more energy to turn it into a steady, ongoing experience. So how do we take an inspiration that lifted us up? And let's assume that we were all inspired and we were all moved and touched by the holidays. How do we take that into the daily lives, make sure it's maintained? It's an excellent question. Which goes over to question number 2, which is a question in general that you find that many Chassidim ask the Rabbeim as well. Whenever I go to a shir, workshop, or a Shabbaton, I always feel so inspired. However, they are just temporary highs. I know that we need to take our inspiration and put it into action. But are there any other techniques to make the inspiration last? Even if I take on a hachlata, a resolution, I soon lose the drive that caused me to take it on in the first place. Another question: what practical suggestions are there for maintaining inspiration and not plateauing? How can I maintain the desire to grow and maintain a high and positive, even when we get back to our routines? And since we're on the topic already, this already also touches the whole issue of boredom in general. Fighting boredom. Can you address the boredom and emptiness in life in general. Another person writes, clearly a student, can you address the boredom and emptiness in yeshivas? So we're addressing here these topics, getting untangled from the blues is how one writer put it. Another, finding strength in times of uncertainty. Because as we enter a world, which essentially is what's happening after Tishrei, and I'll soon elaborate on this, there's all kinds of uncertainty ahead of us. So it's one thing when you're riding high, inspired, in the cocoon, in the womb, surrounded by friends, by colleagues, by the Yom Tevim, lifted on the wings of Tishrei. It's quite another when you're thrust into the world. What can I do to ensure that the inspiration does not dissipate? So let's begin with these series of questions. And I see that some of them also spill over into issues like Shalom Bayis, which of course is the issue of after the honeymoon. Initially, every relationship begins, we hope, with a great spark, with a great ignition. But then what happens afterwards? What happens in time passes? People get used to each other. They lose the spunk, they lose that vitality. So often things become automatic pilot routines. And we all know what kind of dangers lurk once things become routines, become automatic, and are lacking that type of dynamic energy. So this issue of maintaining vitality, maintaining inspiration in relationships has acute and very amplified effect because you're dealing now with a relationship which of course spills over and affects the family and affects children and affects generations as well. Okay. So before we continue, I want to again invite people to write their questions to us at meaningfullife.com/MyLife live. And with that same extension, /dedicate.php, you can also dedicate any of these episodes, which I encourage you to do. A great schus, a great honor, as well as helping us perpetuate and continue these episodes of My Life. So let us get straight to the topic at hand. And the Chassidus brings that from the Sefer Yetzirah, that everything in the universe is built on Olam Shana Nefesh. Rosh Tevis Oshan. Bahar Sinei Oshan. Oshan means smoke, the mountain smoke. Oshan is a Rosh Tevis, an acronym with three letters, Ayin Shin Nun. Elam refers to space. Shana refers to Zman, to time. And Nefesh refers to spirit or soul. You have today in science often the discussion around this triad called time, space, and man. But this long preceded, thousands of years preceded in the concept of Olam Shana Nefesh, which as the Tzemach Tzedek brings in Eida Teira Yisrei from the Alter Rebbe, that the whole Sefer Yetzirah is miyusad, is founded. Sefer Yetzirah considered to be the first Kabbalistic work. Some attribute it to Abraham. There's a work, Reziel HaMalach, some attribute to Adam HaRishon. But Sefer Yetzirah is definitely from the earliest, if not the earliest work. And you'll find there that it structures things when it talks about different levels in this is what it is in time, this is what it is in space, and this is what it is in the human being. So you'll find, for example, there he talks about the mazolas, the signs of the months. So that's in Zman. And every sign has a corresponding limb or organ in the human body. And, of course, has a corresponding element in space. So, for example, Yom Kippur, we talk about the holiest man, the holiest soul, the high priest, entering the holiest space, the Holy of Holies, on the holiest day, Yom Kippur. So time, space, and the human and the soul come together in this fascinating triangle. This explains and this helps understand all the dimensions of Torah and Yiddishkeit in the context, for example, what Shabbos or Yom Kippur is in time, Eretz Yisrael, or the Beis HaMikdash, or the Holy of Holies, is in space. And the human being too has the Yechidah Shebenefesh, the Kohen Gadol Shebenefesh, the Moshe Rabbeinu within each of us, is how it is in the soul. So there's a very intricate relationship between these three, time, space, and the human being, which, as I say, is so consistent with modern physics, and obviously consistent with the whole concept of unity. So none of us are just a vacuum. We're not just loose, we're not just an island unto ourselves. We are intertwined with time and space. Every given moment, you're in that moment, you're in a certain space, and it's you there. So there's the you, the time you're in, and the space you're in. It's an introduction to understand Tishrei in this month and where we're going now in a personal context. And that is what Tishrei is in time, as I mentioned before, in the human being is the head. And in space, it's a state where the things are the central nervous system, the control room of everything that will come afterwards. So as we leave Tishrei, as we leave the holidays, I should say, and we enter into Tishrei, as the Rabbeim mentioned, V'Yakov holach hadarkei, or from Mitzvah Simchas Torah, Mitzvah Shabbos Bereishis, Mitzvah Yom Kippur. The Rebbe brings in the Sichos in Tov Shelamed Ches after the heart attack. The Rebbe spoke the Sichos, and he speaks all the levels of V'Yakov holach hadarkei. Yaakov goes on his way. What means on his way? He's going from one state to another state. Even though actually there he's going from Choron to Eretz Yisrael, but as the Rebbe explains, V'Yakov holach hadarkei refers to going on his way from a certain... So when we go on our way from Tishrei, Meruba B'Meyedes, that journey symbolizes not just a journey in time from a month to the next month and to the rest of the months of the year, it's also a journey in space and a journey of the soul. So it's a journey of the soul that symbolizes transition. And transition is a critical component in life. That's where we are right now. So if you want to say, what is Chassidus applied in this moment of time, this time of the year, is understanding transitions in our lives. All transitions. Now you could say, well, we have transitions later in the year, other times of the year. Yes, but every time of the year is like a shar. The Rebbe brings often when he speaks about Yom Tovim. He says, you learn the Maimorim of Pesach. So Pesach is the highest level, higher than Shavuos and Sukkot. You learn the Maimorim of Shavuos. Shavuos is the highest level, higher than Sukkot and Pesach. You learn the Maimorim of Sukkot. Sukkot is the highest level, higher than Pesach and Shavuos. What's the pshat? So there's the concept of a shar, a gate. All the mitzvahs are connected. Every mitzvah we do is bound to all other mitzvahs because it's all part of one Rotzna Elyon, God's desire. Asher Kedeshanu b'mitzvos v'tzivanu unites all mitzvahs. Then there's the specific desire to do this, he wants that. So the same is true with mitzvahs, and that's why when you do a mitzvah, you really have within it all the other mitzvahs. But yet, God also wants that we should have the specifics. Famous Maimorim Chassidus that talk about this in the context of Reichel Levushaychu, where Rabbi Hanuna Saba went to Achnosas Kala, but the bottom line, he was still missing a mitzvah, so the Yenuka, the child, smelled something in his begadim. So even though he did not miss the actual mitzvah, he didn't miss the hamshacha that came through other mitzvahs, because they're all connected, but that specific mitzvah, that detail, he did not have, because the command of it, le'amrina, it doesn't come... You can't compare it to actually doing something specific. But this connection of all the mitzvahs is what binds them all together. And then there's the specifics. So when we're talking about each holiday, the shar, we're talking about what is the gate through which all the mitzvahs are going. So on Pesach, that time, that energy, time is energy, everything is going through that gate. It's like the mitzvah the Ma'avazaret Tfei. The Gemara speaks, what mitzvah are you careful in? Especially careful in. So every person is saying Chalkeinu b'Seira Secha, even though the Torah is meant to be learned all of it, but everyone has their chelik in Torah. Everyone has their letter in the Torah. Everyone has their particular section. When the Arizal would teach, it says that as different Talmidim, some Talmidim fell asleep at certain areas. The Alshech, Rabbi Alshech, would fall asleep at a certain place. And the Arizal said because his Shama is Shayach, has a relationship with Elam HaDrush, which is Elam HaBriya or Elam HaYetzira, two different opinions. And therefore he falls asleep when the other Arizal is saying Seid or other dimensions of Torah that are not connected to his neshama. The Rebbe once expressed himself humorously that that's not an excuse for people sleeping at the Fabrengen, because I'm speaking Pshat Remesh Drusa all the time, all interwoven. So every neshama is connected to one of them. So we all have a mitzvah to have a zohar beitfei. That doesn't mean that the other mitzvahs you're not obligated. It means this mitzvah has particular relationship with your soul and your destiny and your mission and your calling. So the same thing is here. That every time of the year has this particular message. What's the time of ours? Transition. The transition from a high into entering into so-called the routine, back to the regular. Going from Musafim Kilchosan to Tmidin Kisidran. from something extra, an extra dimension, an extra push, which is the powerful month of Tishrei, the central nervous system, now entering into the local area, time, space of the human being. So this period in time is not just a matter of transition in time, it's a transition in space, and also a transition, as you see, the Jews after Shalosh Regalim, what would they do? It wasn't just time, they actually moved. After the Aliyah L'Regel, where they went for their pilgrimage to Yerushalayim, to Beis HaMikdash, they would return back home, which has halachas regarding Yaakov halach l'darkei, the halacha of Zayin Cheshvan, why we don't begin praying for the rain in Eretz Yisrael until the 7th of Cheshvan, so that everyone can return back home, because it takes approximately that amount of time to the last locality, which was by Nahar Pros. So every Jew should go, so they shouldn't have the rains to disturb their travel. So we return back home. And also in spirit, it's a shift going from the rich holiday season. That's where the Eibishter says, before we go, let's make one Yom Tov where we spend time together. Because now you're going back on your journey back to so-called the regular world. So in a sense, it also symbolizes Yeridus HaNeshama B'guf, the soul's journey from heaven to earth. So even though that happened upon birth or upon conception, but in the year is the similar idea, the soul is returning back to its regular avodah, its regular activity. But regular is a big word. Regular means on an external level, it doesn't have the same giluyim and revelations. So now comes the question, how do we have the strength in that situation to maintain the inspiration? So all these questions become far broader and now connected to all the questions of Chassidus of how does the neshama have the power as it comes down below to deal with the struggles of life. It's one thing when the neshama is being infused, mashbiyan they say from the word shvi, mashbiyan they say ti tzadik v'alti rosh, as Tzemach Tzedek explains, mashbiyan means that it's being sated, that it's being fed, nourished with all kinds of energies. But what happens now after it comes out of its mother's womb and it's made to forget the Torah that it learned when it was in its pregnancy? How does it now maintain, not just maintain, how does it survive and how does it thrive? So there's a very powerful sikha. Shabbos Parsha Lech Lecha, Tovshin Mem Tes. It's printed in the Sefer HaSichos Tovshin Mem Tes, Lech Lecha, where he's talking about the beginning of the month of Cheshvan and asks a very fascinating question, right at the beginning of the sikha. The Rebbe says, when we're moving from the month of Tishrei to Cheshvan, there's a Dvar Pella, something strange, something that requires explanation. It was Foded Bir. What is it? Tishrei is a month that doesn't just have a holiday. Meruba, it's filled with holidays. Rosh Hashanah, Aseret Yemei Tshuva, Yom Kippur, of course Sukkot, Hishayna Rabbah, Shmini Atzeret, Simchas Torah. Then the 4 days between Yom Kippur and Rosh and Sukkot is also considered special. And of course the days between Rosh and Yom Kippur, as I mentioned. And even the last days, we still don't say Tachan because Meruba B'Meidis. The holiday is filled with holidays. Meruba. Shvi. Muzba Bakel. Filled, sated. Month of Cheshvan is the absolute diametric opposite, antithetical. That there are no holidays at all. Major transition. Why were they able to make such a jump, such a leap? You could spread out the holidays. Put a few in Tishrei, a few in Cheshvan, a few in the other months. Fine, you want to keep it to Tishrei because the central nervous system, the head, has most of the primary organs. But why such a transition? And the Rebbe went even further, that all other months of the year have some holiday. Kislev, after Cheshvan, has Chanukah. Tevis have Asara B'Tevis, which even though Yohav Chiyom Melu, now it's not a holiday, but it will become one. You have Asara B'Tevis. In Shvat, Tu B'Shvat. Oder is Purim. Nisan is Pesach. Iyar, besides Lag B'Eimer and Pesach Sheni, we also have the whole month counting the Eimer. Sivan is Shavuos. Tammuz, Shivasa B'Tammuz. Of, Tisha B'Av, Tu B'Av, Lo Yom Tev L'Yisrael, Ki Chamisha B'Av Yom Kippurim. And Elul, the whole month is a month of Midas Harachimim, Yud Gimel Midas Harachimim, Chedesh Harachimim. And the Alter Rebbe has to come to explain why Melech B'Sada, why it's still weekdays. Even though you have such a revelation of the 13 divine attributes of mercy, of compassion, of empathy. Only Cheshvan remains one without a Yontif. Why such a strong transition? Why do you thrust somebody from such an extreme to such an extreme? It's like complete light to complete void of holidays. And the Rebbe says, since it was Parsha Lech Lecha is usually the Parsha, one of the Parshas where the transition from Tishrei to Cheshvan takes place, that the same story is Lech Lecha Ma'atzacham Latacham Beis Avicha, which Chassidus explains is connected to the journey of the soul from one extreme to the next, from a comfort zone to a world, to a foreign and alien world. The soul comes down from the Igra Rama. The Igra Rama means a tall, high place, Igra, the highest ceiling. Lebira Amikta, to the depths, the deep pit. It's an extreme transition, because the purpose of this Yerida is Yerida Tzarech. The purpose is to see what we are like when we do not have those revelations. So if there'd be even some revelation of a holiday, you still can say that's our crutch, that's our so-called oasis, that's what we're holding on to. So you go from Tishrei to Cheshvan, the real test is you have no holidays to hold on to. How will you do? And here you can really demonstrate the key purpose of entire existence is Aveda B'Keyach Atzmei. What we will initiate on our own. So just as Tishrei has its purpose in time, space, and the human being, what is its purpose? To feed us, to nourish us, to nurture us, and give us all the tools we need. There's also a purpose in the transition as we go from Tishrei into Cheshvan, or we go from Shabbos Bereshis, Simchas Torah, and the other holidays preceding them, into the regular year. What's the purpose? To see what we're made of. Now that you've been armed and you've been given all the resources necessary, now what are you going to do? And in this lies the real essence of creation, the work of on our own. That's why Cheshvan is so extreme to Tishrei. It's an unbelievable question and unbelievable answer, because it also demonstrates and expresses to us the whole purpose of existence. So not only is the issue how do we maintain the inspiration, that's taka the purpose. Inspiration in some way is still asurusa delayla. Tishrei, we didn't do anything to earn these holidays. They're given to us on a platter. They give us power and they lift us. Now the whole purpose of that is asurusa delatata daveda b'keyach atzmei shalheves elam eleh, the flame rising on its own. What will you do now? The neshama is given all the power. As I mentioned, it's taught the entire Torah in its mother's womb. But then it's made to consciously forget, as the Alter Rebbe explains. Because what's the point of teaching it and then making to forget as the angel comes and does shh, which is why we have a cleft over our upper lip. The silence is only on a conscious level. It remains there. But now the challenge is, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to access it? And that's a whole different challenge. And Chassidus talks about this at length in many, many places. How we accomplish something when we are on our own, so to speak. This is also the central part of the Rebbe's Aveda, the Rebbe's Nesias, as he made it clear in the first Fabring in Yud Shvat Tovshin Yud Aleph. The Rebbe said, after the Maimer, he said, Schwerfleck sagen, Eisdruck, fegelich in bosom, soll sich nicht einreden, fegelich in bosom. Don't deceive yourself into thinking that now you appointed me and I'm going to take care and do all your work. Everybody's got their pekel. Everyone's got their work. I don't decline, refrain from helping, but basically I'll meet you halfway. And this became a cornerstone of the Rebbe's entire approach to Veda, to Shlichus, to Chassidim, to everything. Poured. But we have to do something on our effort. And that's what this period in time is now. So then when you look at it that way, it's not just a question, okay, how do I hold on to the inspiration? No, there's a purpose why you have this challenge. Because now it's about you. What are you going to do now that you've been given these strengths? Now that you've been blessed with gifts, what are you going to do? And that comes the challenge, and outcomes, how do we build those kalim, those containers? How do we access and how do we maintain this inspiration? The Rebbe, Friedrich Rebbe once said to Avram Hecht, Olav Shalom, I heard from him, that the difference between American Bachrim and Russian Bachrim is the difference between twigs, hay, straw, and logs. Straw ignites quickly, but it burns out quickly. And logs take a while till you light them, till they catch. But once they start burning, they burn for a long time on their own. So American people ignite quickly and burn out quickly. And Russians take a while to ignite, but once they ignite, they burn like logs. But we see that when you light a fireplace, a campfire, you always begin with a certain initial fuel: paper, twigs, hay, straw, anything to get it going. But if the logs are not there, it's going to burn out. So you need both. The inspiration is the initial ignition, the initial spark. But then comes maintaining it. Maintaining it requires logs, fuel, ongoing fuel that burns slowly and ongoing, and it becomes part of who you are. So had Tishrei remained Tishrei, it would be Tishrei's power, it wouldn't be our power. You want our power, now we have to build something. So now the question is, how do you do this? And this is the challenge that each of us has, whether it's in a marriage that seems to be going stale and stagnating, God forbid, whether it's boredom in yeshiva or boredom in your life period, monotony, whether it's inspirations that you get from shiurim, workshops, or Shabbatons, or whatever it may be, or as what we're discussing here, the inspiration of the holiday season. So now that we know the purpose, now comes the question is how? What do you do? And there are many things you can do. First of all, never underestimate the power of inertia and the power of gravitating back to your initial place. Zrik chutra avira, the Medrash says. You throw a stick up in the air, it will always fall on its head, it will always fall the heaviest part back to it. Everything gravitates back to its natural state. So inspiration can deceive us into thinking that we are actually been uplifted and we have earned our way. So by knowing that with humility, that you now have to do work, then you begin doing the work. Often when the Rebbe at the end of many Fabrengens, he would give mashke and mezenis, either to Orchim or to Chnossos Orchim in Tishrei, or to different organizations who were doing a dinner, or Melava Malka, and so on. And very often he would quote Drashas Haran. The Drashas Haran explains why the Nevi'im, the prophets, when they would prophesize, they would hold on to something, like a vessel or a cup or something that they would hold on, some physical thing, in order to be megashim, in order that the prophecy should manifest and have some tangible hold on, so it should become a reality. If not, it would just be an amorphous prophecy. The Rabbeim, including the Rebbe, when they said a Chassidus, you saw they tied a handkerchief around their hand, which was not mamish the same idea, but to avoid so-called klois hanefesh, the rotze, the yearning, but also to ground the deep divrei elikim chaim being said, to ground it and bring it down to our reality. So this is a critical component, the power of maisa, the power of action. Resolutions, inspiration are very good. But action is the grounding element that makes sure that something continues. And when is the best time to start an action? Right in the beginning. If you say, you know what, I'm going to get married, and then 5 years from now we'll decide we're going to do something together. No. When you start something, the best way to begin is at the outset, to make achlata, which is why the Rabbeim, every year, Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah, they would start a new hidur, an action. So the first thing is, if you want to hold on to this inspiration, immediately translate it into an action. A few years ago, a fellow I know, who now still have a very close relationship, we worked together. After Simchas Teda, he came to me, he was a little shikr, he was a little l'chaim, he said, I want to start learning Chassidus with you every Shabbos. Okay, I thought one of these hachlotas, he'll never remember. Well, to my mazel, he did remember. And he knocked on my door the next Shabbos, and we started learning. And this learning became a relationship and a friendship and many other things. He took achlot and he stuck to it. That's going to be the hardest part, maintaining the connection. So the first thing is not just holding on, say, how do I hold on to inspiration? It's not going to hold. You need to light a fire, you need a log, and the log is a achlota. You make a decision, like he says in Cholzu, like the Rebbe brings often. You make a resolution with someone else, in a way you're stuck. I can tell you one of the best secrets that I use to get beyond procrastination, beyond avoiding, beyond all the challenges of doing things, is to get stuck in a situation. What that means is to actually commit to something that you can't get out of, a good thing. I'll never forget when I was a little child, it was Tavshin Chav Zayin, Sukkos. Tavshin Chav Zayin, so that would be 66. And it didn't stop raining in Crown Heights. Rained and rained and rained. I don't just mean Crown Heights, probably all of Brooklyn and New York. So, a rainy Sukkos, and we eat in a Sukkah. So, schach and a Chabad Sukkah is very thick. So in the beginning, the rain doesn't come in so quickly. But once it gets saturated, musbah, once it gets mashbin, it gets completely saturated with water, then it doesn't just come in, it comes in this unpredictable globs down your neck. The whole misery of a rainfall of that nature. But you kaim mitzvah simcha, and this simcha v'sukkah. So that Tavshin Chav Zayin rained and rained. At my childish memory, it seemed like it never stopped raining. I heard later years that it was correct downpour. Now the Rebbe had a custom to have two farbrengens on Sukkos, in the Sukkah. One was the second day of Sukkot, and one was Shabbos Chalamoid Sukkot. In the early years, it was for the Bnei Yeshiva, the Rebbe would farbring the second night. Simchas Beis Sheva. It was pouring rain, but the farbrengens are farbring, and the farbring began. I came at some point. I stand in the back of the Sukkah, which was to the right of 770, and I couldn't hear anything, but I saw the scene. Pouring rain outside. The Sukkah was, the drops were coming all over. Everybody was affected. The Rebbe was farbrengen, oblivious to the whole scene. After the Maimer, the Rebbe stood up, took off his coat. Everyone thought he's finishing. No, the Rebbe, in his own way, what Maimer did he say? Of course, the Sukkah's Tavshin Chav Zayin. V'shaftem mayim b'sosen. I know it's a Sukkah's Maimer, but the humor did not escape most people. That while it's raining, v'shaftem mayim b'sosen. You draw the water with joy. Anyway, this little boy, me, standing and watching the scene. It's hard to remember how a child processes things, but I'll tell you what kind of indelible effect it had on me in my life. The effect it had was, now that I look back in retrospect, was the Rebbe, there's no mitzvah to sit in a sukkah when it's raining. The mitzvah to eat in a sukkah. So we don't go in the sukkah because it's raining. We don't stop going and eating a meal because it's raining. But you can wait. The Rebbe did not have to farbring that day in the sukkah. It could be what they call a rain check, a rain date. A rain date where you reschedule it. Or the Rebbe could have farbring in the shul without saying l'chaim, without even drinking or doing anything like that. There were a lot of eitzes, so to speak, in nature to do it differently. But here's a man that committed to farbring every sukkah. So it's raining, so what? A good commitment has to be maintained. And you don't ever stop it. What the impression it left on me was, you start something good, you never stop. And it had a direct impact. 32 years ago, Tav Shemem Beis, I was already working in the Sichos and I was completely busy. I got a phone call from an individual who said that someone introduced him to me looking for spiritual inspiration, Jewish spiritual inspiration. So all week I was extremely busy with the Sichos. I told him to come Thursday night. Came with a friend. Both of them are already in another world. And they came and we spoke. And we hit it off. They came back the next week. They started bringing another friend and another friend. This began a series of classes that till this day have never stopped. Not due to rain, not snow, not even September 11th. Under the weather, over the weather. The only time sometimes I travel, so I'll record but I never stopped this class for one reason. Because I learned from the Rebbe, start something good, you never stop. By now, probably 40,000 people have come to this class. In the beginning, I didn't even know who, what, when. Now I know many of the people. I send out an email to them, so I know the connection, etc. I don't know if it's the longest running class on earth, but it's definitely a long class that keeps on going. And Chaver Islay. Not advertised. It's one person brings another. So it's an unbroken chain, links. Everyone there was from a person before him, from back to that 1982 winter night. Just a small example. And I look back, I never planned it this way. I didn't think it's going to happen, but I just continued. Sometimes one person came, sometimes 10 people came, sometimes 80 people came. I never stopped, to the extent I moved it later to Wednesday night, that once the group came, and they weren't aware it was Shavuos night, it was Wednesday night, and they ring the bell, and we have, of course, a Yom Tov. I was already home from shul. I invite them all in. I say, okay, please sit down. They say, why are you so dressed up? You have a whole Yom Tov here. They didn't know it was a Shavuos even. So I said, sit down when you come. It's a celebration. They said, yeah, but last week wasn't, and next week we assume. So once they sat down, I bring with them what Shavuos was, etc., etc. That's the extent that it continued. And I meet sometimes people now 20 years later that show up. The power of consistency, the story of Rabbi Akiva, what impressed him to finally make a decision at age 40, as much as he was inspired by his future wife, was the drops of water that he saw pierce a stone. It wasn't a powerful gush. It wasn't the power. It wasn't intensity. It was quality. Kvias itim l'teira, we say. Kva. To make kvias. Kvias means not cramming it in one shot, every day, but consistent. That's the power of maintaining something. So you want to start to maintain inspiration, channel it into a resolution that continues day after day, or week after week, or month after month. This is true with marriage. This is true with every relationship. It's true personally. Everything requires that type of consistency. And you cannot expect magic to happen if you're not creating the logs. You need the containers to continue. It's not going to just come. That's the effort we have to make in Cheshvan. As I said, it's not just in time and space, but also, like Havagelim Kem Teira, you have to go away from your natural comfort zone, that's in space, and also in spirit. That we are ready to take on our own effort, not that which is coming from above. So we have the fact, the keiches, but you have to do something to act. So that's one specific thing that every person can do. Now let's address the issue of boredom and monotony. We all have moments of that, if not more. We all know that boredom and monotony is also a breeding ground for all problems. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does human nature. Boy reik ein boy mayim. Why is it double? Boy reik, it says empty pit. Why does it have to say there's no water? Because nechoshem v'akravim yesh boy. Water may not be there, but nechoshem v'akravim will be there. When there's a void, you're creating a breeding ground for vipers and for scorpions and for parasites and maggots and leeches and whatever other synonym you can add into the equation. Psychologically, this is very true. I believe in the early episodes of MyLife, I talked about a discussion I had with a group of teens at risk who are already in rehab. And it was an informal discussion. They asked me to come speak to them. One of them knew me. So I went to speak to them, and listen to this. I asked them, how did you get yourself into trouble in the first place? No person sets out to just get addicted to something. First of all, human dignity. Who wants to be addicted to something? No person on earth wants to be addicted. So how did you get yourself into this trouble in the first place? So one person said, my parents were going through an ugly, bitter divorce. I was very depressed. Another had a loss. Another had bad friends. This one moved to another city. Everyone had their thing. But I said, but that's still not necessarily explained, because you have other people who went through a loss or tragedy, God forbid, and did not fall. So we got down to one word, boredom. When you're in a state of boredom, there's a vacuum. You're looking for some high. Whatever will come your way. If it's toxins, God forbid. If it's healthy, great. But you're not guaranteed. So boredom is a critical component. How do you preempt it? Well, you can't just wait and say, I'm going to sit around being bored and I'm going to just hope for the best. You have to fill the boir. You have to fill, it should not be a boirek, which means you have to fill your life with something passionate. So I mentioned the first thing is decisions, resolutions that you do that minute after minute has that effect. Kvias, but also passion. Not just commitment for the name of commitment. Do something passionate, where your talents are being used, whether it's musical talents, whether it's teaching talents, whether it's communication talents, whether it's inspiring people, interacting with others. Something where you feel productive. Something where you take leadership and ownership. So this passion is not an empty pit. Healthy passion is the best antidote to unhealthy passion. Boredom and monotony will create a breeding ground. Who knows what's going to come in? Whereas if you take the lead and you control what you're going to be passionate about, you're automatically weakening the possibility that it's going to be hijacked. Is that a guarantee in life? Guarantees? There's always challenges. But you're talking about minimizing risk and maximizing results. This is the response, which you see now is not just a post-Tishrei question, a cheshvan. It's about life in general. How do you go from a state of, let's call, heightened consciousness, heightened awareness, light, into a darker space where you're on your own, so to speak? The answer is you have to do something and make it consistent, and you have to do and passion, infused with passion. When those things are in place, and it's something like the Gemara says, "B'mokim shali bechafetz." He asked, "Where should I begin learning?" And where can be said in two ways. It can be where space. It can be where in the books. Where would be the physical space where your heart desires, where you gravitate to. Or it could be which book should I begin? Should I start from this Gemara to that Gemara? B'mokim shali bechafetz. Interesting answer. Where your heart desires. Since when are we following our heart? We should follow what the Torah says. Same like chanech l'nat al pi darkei. What do you mean darkei? Chanech l'nat al pi derech haTorah. What do you mean darkei? Obviously it's the derech haTorah, but it's tailored and customized to the mitzvah, the hava zoyer beit fei, to your particular personality. To try to force, for example, a person who's, let's say, passionate about learning Rashi and Chumash and Rashi, or someone who's passionate learning about Jewish history or Tanakh or Chassidus, and say, listen, you must learn something else. Obviously, there's a chiyuv to learn Kol Chelkei HaTorah, all parts of the Torah. But one of the ways to get someone going is Mokim Shli Bechafetz. Let it be a thing that he has desire, where he relates to. He'll do it with more passion, therefore he'll be more committed. Amnochem Goldschmidt, they say, was a major maskil in Chassidus, but he was a mashgiach in Igla. So they asked him, Chabal Chassidus, what are you doing a mashgiach in Igla? He says, that's for my nefesh abam is the Chassidus. I like that. And this is for Iskafia. This is my work that I do to be a mashgiach in Igla. Fine. Obviously, we need that as well. But Mokim Li B'Chafetz is still a statement in the Gemara, and the Rebbe brings it in Igris when referring to people. Find something that the student can relate to, something he finds or she finds passion, and you got a whole different type of commitment, because then it's owned, and there's a leadership element. When you're a leader and you're influencing, you're far less prone to be influenced, because you're either influencing or you're being influenced. So these are some of the, I won't call it tricks of the trade, because they're not tricks, and they're not gimmicks. They're actual methods that are very proven techniques and sensible ones. However, it takes that commitment. If you don't want, you're not going to do it. It won't happen. So one of the ways, as I said, is to get stuck, like I mentioned with the sukkah, the effect it had on me. Today, sometimes I get myself involved. I commit to something with other people. Now there's deadlines, there's schedules. I may hate it, but now I'm in. And it's good things. So find something to volunteer to, start learning with someone, host something in your home. The list goes on. And once you know this, there's really no excuse. So you can't expect inspiration is just going to continue out of where? Where are the logs? Where's the fuel? That's what you have to provide. Let's go to another question now, which continues and extends. I talked before about uncertainty. We're entering a new year and the world is burning, both collectively and individually. You see in the Middle East, the upheavals. There's a lot of uncertainty. So the question is, how do we maintain strength in times? How do we find strength in times of uncertainty? Well, the answer is similar, but I want to read a few questions before I actually give you the answers to this discussion. And here's what the questions. I'm fearful about the future. Where are we headed? Where's my life headed? I'd like more control, direction. With all that is going on in my life, at home, at work, the pressures to make a living, sometimes I feel completely out of control. How can I regain control? So that's on a personal level. I'm a younger man in Crown Heights. I'd call myself more or less average mainstream. My question is as follows, like probably most others gone through the system, I'm at loss as how to proceed in my life. How much money I should need, how much and what I should do to find a job temporarily as well as for the long term. How to set up my home, what to do now to be a healthy Chassidic home. How and what to learn Torah to keep my sanity. How to balance that with working all this aside from or together with my own personal issues in which I give my Yetzer Hara too much room. I'm not the type of person to just sit back and do nothing. I'd rather try to find out about what possibilities there are by speaking to people mostly. Almost all of what I'm told is what not to do. I know too much of what not to do. I feel like I've heard more times than a human should ever hear. I need to know what to do. Second question. Control. I read in self-help books about how one should take responsibility about what happens to them in their life, and that we can control what happens to us, and this in itself gives a sense of control. Doctors have proven that the degree that a person feels out of control is the degree that he will be stressed. I also read about the example that you can accomplish anything if you just learn how to do it. Just like if someone shows you a recipe to prepare a certain meal. If you master the recipe, you can predict how the dish comes out. I really like this thought. It's empowering. Go learn and be positive, yet I'm not sure how this works with the Torah view that nature is not at all. A view that nature is not all, especially for Jews. I hate to say this, but sometimes I wish there were some rules that can be predicted. I feel lost and out of control. I'm gaining by relying on Hashem's kindness above nature, but still like feeling as if I'm feeling as if I'm in control. Can these two things both work together? I think that by trusting too much in Hashem, I did less for my business and life success. Question 3. We are at the onset of a new year and Mashiach is still not here. How can we continue on like this? There's so much confusion today on how to lead a proper life and to do our mission properly. Is it shlichus, mivtzoyim, davening? I'm fearful of what the future holds. Where are we headed? Okay. So let me address all these in the context of what we spoke about till now. And here too I want to demonstrate how this time in the year and what Chassidus says about it, including the sikh I mentioned and other places, about transitions, going from one state to another, directly respond to these questions. So I'm not just giving advice. We're talking about Chassidus Applied, MyLife, Chassidus Applied. Taking Chassidus and applying it to questions like this. Well, in generally speaking, when you talk about control, think of it this way. If you want to control, you have to be able to, let's say, hold on to something. You're in the middle of a stormy sea. If you hold on to something that's being controlled by the stormy sea, you're not getting any security. Because what you're holding on to is just as uncertain as you are. So the challenge is not to hold on to things that are temporary and impermanent, but to hold on to something that is strong and foundational. So we have the language in Chassidus. It says, when you're bound above, you don't fall below. Classic story with Meir Prim Nishlaner. He was in a city, and there was the icy slopes. No one went to the mikveh because it was very slippery, but he went. He didn't slip. Why, as he answered later? Because this is a line that Rebbe used often about shlichus, sending people to distant places, difficult challenges. Same thing with a neshama, down on earth. When you're bound above, you don't fall below. What's above mean? Above means you're holding on to something that's not bound by the rules of nature. It's not bound by the same uncertainty and temporariness and impermanence of material things. But what do we get addicted to? What do we hold on to? Everything that's impermanent. Money, food, pleasures, delights. The material world itself, which is why Chassidus talks about Shayich L'Amuna. Why is it so important to talk about the Bitla Ilms? Klotzkash. Yeah, we understand that it's the truth. That a world that has no validity of its own, how can it stand? So God has to continuously renew it from scratch. The Maimorim of Rosh Hashanah Tofrei Samachalav that elaborate on this, and many other places of Chassidus. But why is it so important to emphasize? Because it's teaching us that the material world does not have substance for you to rely on. You want to hold on, you want to have something that is certain, you need to hold on to something that's certain. And the only thing that's certain is something that's not material based. It's something that's ruchnius based. Like he says in the Hemshech Tzadik Daled, that in Gashmius is kiyume not mitzaratzme, and mitziyuse is not mitzaratzme. Ruchnius mitziyuse is not mitzaratzme, but kiyume is mitzaratzme. As the Rebbe has a long ha'ara there, which is not for now, a long discussion, the meaning of that. Why? Because there's an expression, bittul kenish bottle werden. Ruchnius is defined by bittul, and bittul can never get eliminated. In this world, everything is a yesh, and a yesh could be bottle. Bittul, the more you eliminate it, the more you nullify it, the more mitzias it is, because that's its whole personality. It feeds on bittul. And of course, it's because Eir and bittul connect you to the source, and the source, mitzius, matzmusei, is ultimate reality, absolute reality. When you hold on to that, you're completely certain. Frankly, I don't know another formula. So all the questions about certainty, uncertainty comes down to going back to Tishrei and Cheshvan, or Tishrei after the holidays. Tishrei is when we see the revealed disconnection. Now you're going off on your own, so to speak, after the Tzimtzum Arishan, and now you feel you're on your own. The challenge is to realize you're not on your own, that there's really a force at work, but now that force wants you to do something. I held you by the hand, I carried you, I lifted you. Now what are you going to do? So here is the challenge, not to be deceived by the helam, by this concealment, and recognize that you could tie yourself above. And then what do? You connect that bound above to an actions, consistent kaviyas itim, as I said, and passion. Now you're channeling the certainty, the foundation. You have the foundation, but no one lives in a foundation. You need a building. You can't just say, I have a solid, eternal foundation. You need a structure with floor 1, floor 2, floor 3. And here is where we bring it into actions and into b'mokim sheli b'chofetz and passion. So the answer to all these questions about control and about uncertainty is all answered by one thing. You need to connect to something that's eternal. There's no other shortcut. When things are going well, you can convince yourself, I have a long lifeline, I have a lot of money, let's say, or I have a lot of connections, and I can last on that. Okay, good luck. Logic will tell you that all that is just a matter of time. Unfortunately, we are blinded. So when things are going well, we can convince ourselves that what we're doing is what is giving us success. When in truth, that's not the case at all. The wise one knows that Ezu Chacham Areis Anel does not wait. You don't have to wait to hit rock bottom or to lose a sense of control and certainty. You anticipate. That's why Yosef was given the Mishnah Lamelech. What's the big thing? Yosef interpreted the dreams was a great thing. He interpreted that there'd be 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. But what appointed him viceroy of Egypt? What? Because he gave the idea, let's now stockpile the grain. Once you know there's going to be 7 years of famine, what's the chiddush? Of course, stockpile. The chiddush is to follow through in action. Because you always think there's another tomorrow. Look why we have forced savings. Why? Because people will say, if you don't force them, they'll say, you know what, I can't pay this month, I'll pay next month twice. In 3 months, I'll pay 3 times as much. You keep procrastinating and then you can maintain it. Yosef was followed through, that even though he knew right now everything looked so good, and people said, maybe the famine won't come. He followed through. And that's why Egypt became a superpower. So that it's that type of understanding. Don't become overconfident in times of plenty and thinking that because that right now you have, that's why it can continue to sustain you. You have to remember that ultimately, as the Frierdiker Rebbe told the man pointing the gun to his head in Tafresh Pei Zayin, Yud Beis Tammuz, when he was in jail, that this toy can frighten someone that has one world and many gods, not someone who has one God and 2 worlds, or many worlds. We diversify. We don't rely on eggs in one basket. We have a God that when you hold strong, you're bound above. You're makusha to the Rebbe, halzach in the klamke, which means on the door handle, then you're bound above and you don't fall below. And this is the power. We connect Tishrei into the rest of the year by being bound. So just like the time of Tishrei, the space of Tishrei, and the soul, the connection to the source, to the central nervous system, is what makes sure the rest of the body is healthy. Yes, when you're sitting in the head is working. But what about when you're in the organs, in the extremities, in the far distant places? Is the head still controlling? Are you zugebunden zu Eben? Are you bound to the mind? Are you bound to the brain, like he says in Perek Beis in Tanya, where he talks about Nsi Yisrael, about Rosh Alfi Yisrael, Neshama Klolis. You're bound to that Reish, which the Reish of Tishrei is connected to the Reish in Zman, that's in time. In space is the Reish, the head and the human being. And in the Nefesh is the Reish Rosh Alfi Yisrael. It's the Nos Nisim, the Rebbe and the Rabbeim that give us that connection. And when you have that connection, it is the best preventive medicine against lack of control. Where are we headed? Mashiach is not here. Well, yes, we have many questions. But when you have this approach, you forge ahead. You know you're connected. It doesn't mean you have all the answers. Since when answers are a prerequisite to forge ahead? There are many things in life we do when we believe in something, we just do it even if we don't have full answers. When you love your child deeply, and even though some things may seem impossible, you say we can do anything. Because it's the commitment, it's the love that keeps it going. Let's go to another, with the time remaining, let us go to another question. Positive attitudes. Please clarify regarding the concept of what is called the law of attraction. Can it be true according to Torah? Is it a Jewish idea? What does Chassidus say about the law of attraction? I watched The Secret and I'm having mixed feelings. Part of me is saying that it's a type of Avodah Zarah. Okay, The Secret and the law of attraction, if you don't know, the Rebbe would say Tova Alecha Bracha, but since it's been a phenomenon, a bestseller, etc., it's this book that came out and then a film, etc., where it talks about the power of attraction, that when you set your mind to something, you can get anything you want. Made millions of dollars. So definitely, the author of the book of The Secret, definitely the power of attraction worked. The question is if it works for anyone else, and what does Chassidus have to say about this? So I watched The Secret and I'm having mixed feelings. Part of me is saying it's a type of Avodah Zarah. To think your mind creates your future. Does not sound too Jewish. Besides, it seems to negate the idea of schar ve'enish, reward and punishment. If you create your future, then what you have in life does not depend on what you deserve due to your actions. On the other hand, Tzemach Tzedek told the Chassid, trach gut v'zayin gut. He didn't say the slandered lashon of have betachin. Slandered, I assume, means the usual of have betachin. He just spoke about having your thoughts positive. The people that explain this law tried to say it's a type of teva, nature. What we would say, put by Hashem in the world. Just like electricity or magnets. If you think about what you want and feel the feeling as if you already have, you somehow end up getting it. Example, you want to lose weight, you don't say I'm fat, you say yourself in your mind, you see yourself in your mind skinny as if you're already there. With a lot of positive feelings, all of a sudden the world around you will sort of provide the conditions for it to happen. So an example can be you will fall on the best trainer or find a partner to work out with that is a perfect match for you, something that sounds too good to just happen. We also know it says, B'derech she'adam reitze leilach melichenese. Please explain. Now, well, there's also the expression, B'makom shemachshavte shel adam sham nimtza, the place where a person sets his mind, and the Rebbe brings example from Erevin. When you set a certain thing with your mind, it's considered as if you're there. So how does it all consist and not consistent? Well, I can't speak about The Secret and Power of Attraction very well because I'm not very intimately familiar with it. But it did appear to me that it's somewhat of a gimmick and trying to tell people that if you imagine a jaguar in your driveway, it will ultimately happen. So I think, it's like everything, any good scam or any good con, it's not completely sheker, not completely false. There are elements of truth. However, it's overpromised, and the best proof of it is, did people actually do it? Did they actually get there? When the Tzemach Tzedek said, trach gut v'zayin gut, and we made it very clear, there's a whole sikha from the Rebbe on this, in Chelik Lamed Aleph Shmois, where he talks about this. It's not just a sgula, he just said, trach gut v'zayin gut. That actually does make a difference. Health matters when you think good. As they say, the way the neurons are fired, that's how they get wired. So there's definitely a truth to that. And attitude makes a big difference. Attitude can affect even a psychosomatic effect. People who have visitors and guests in a hospital, their immune system gets stronger, their willpower to fight. Someone that doesn't have, God forbid, gets demoralized and weakened, and their drive is weaker. However, the question is to what extent. At the end of the day, God runs the world. But he made it in a way, like he was writing in this question, that b'derech hateva, we have the power, our attitude has a tremendous amount of power. But it's all about what God wants us to do. If someone will say, listen, I want to set my mind that I should make $1 billion. Yeah, well, you need mazel, you need a bracha. And it's true, with effort, and you have a positive attitude, it may happen. But a type of guarantee that it must happen, what's going to happen is what God wants to happen. So this is not outside of the realm of the divine, and not outside of the realm of the divine mission. So the key thing is to remember that the focus here is not the means, but the end. To gain materialism, for the end of materialism with the mind, I'm not saying it's impossible, but that's not necessarily what needs to happen. What needs to happen is when you set your mind that I will do what God wants me to do in this world, there's nothing that could stand in the way of that. Whereas just to set your mind to some type of taiva you have, or some type of desire, they're not necessarily, Chassidus and Torah would say the power of attraction would work. So this part of it is correct, and part of it is somewhat commercialized and turned into some just indulging or whatever you want to indulge in, and so on. So it comes down to, yes, the power of the mind, the power of the will, to overcome tremendous obstacles. But in Torah and Chassidus, it's always connected to personal responsibility and to personal mission. It's not just an end in itself. This is a brief response to all of this. So I would say is that we actually use this concept when it comes to matters of betachon, trust in God in times of crisis, in times of illness, in times of other challenges, in times of difficulties to overcome a challenge. Absolutely. As far as using this idea of tragut v'zayngut about matters of making, let's say, a lot of money or fulfilling some other desire, that's not what the Tzemach Tzedek said. Is it impossible that when a person says their mind to that won't work? No, I didn't say it's impossible. It has its power. Just like we learn about Achdus. Achdus has power. That's why the Eibishter had to be Mevalbel, Bovel, the Deir HaFloge, because they were united. But they were united against God, because unity has power. And it can achieve great things, terrible great things, what I mean by great. Horrible things. Because unity, God bound power to unity. So there's power when the people set their mind. But it doesn't mean that's the purpose of it. I don't know if I'd call it Aveda Zara. I would call it Aveda Zara Shazara Le, meaning it's Aveda Sayesh, it's about you. The idea here is that it's not about you. When you talk about Betachon, it's about God. You're believing that God can take care of things. And you completely believe it's possible. It's not about me. That I'm so powerful that whatever I set my mind to, I can do. That's not the message. The message is that whatever you set your mind to, in the context of trusting Hashem, like we said, connecting to above, when you're tied above, you don't fall below. That's the underlying message. And that's the power of where we are right now as we leave the holiday season, and Shabbos Bereshis, and we enter now into so-called the regular Yimei Achel, starting from Cheshvan, the transition, that we don't go alone. The Rebbe said to Ashlucha, he said, Ich fordach mitaych, I travel with you. We go where the Reish follows us. But now the challenge is you have to recognize that. You have to bring it into your life. In Tishrei did some of the work for us. Much of the work. It lifted us on its wings. After Gimel Tammuz, I believe we all can relate to this. The Rebbe is with us. However, now it takes more effort for us to not be deceived by the concealment and to hold stronger and to make more effort on our part. And when you do it, it becomes far more you own it, and becomes far more premious and far more integrated. And when that happens, obviously, then you are a true Keli to receive everything. Whereas when you're lifted, you could still say, maybe you didn't earn your way, similar to what Purim did over Matan Torah. Kof aleim har kegigis. So midor rabbalar, so they could still have a complaint. You forced us to receive the Torah. Purim, they received the Berotzen HaTeiv, Berotzeni Kibla Aleim. Kaimu Masha Kiblu Kfar. Kaimu say Yehudim Masha Kiblu Lases. Kiblu, they accepted it now willingly. That's the work that we have to do after Tishrei. This is the work we have after Gimel Tammuz. And the Eibishter should help as we enter this world, and enter the world, so to speak, outside of Tishrei, into the world where we can seemingly think we're on our own, but we should recognize we're not, and do everything possible to align ourselves to the kavanah of the Rebbe, the kavanah of Chassidus, the kavanah of Torah, the kavanah of the Eibishter, all one. In doing our particular shlichus, whatever part of the world we go to, b'yakam holach l'darkei, infused with all the power given to us, mashbin, chedesh hashvi, muzba, that we're sated and satiated with from the month of Tishrei, and it should be a blessed year and Ashnas Hagu'ula. This has been My Life, Chassidus Applied, episode 39. Until next Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m., everyone should have a very blessed week. A good Gebench Diyar. Thank you.